It's time now for some political analysis. Molly Ball joins us. She is a national political correspondent at Time magazine, getting tongue-tied this morning. Salena Zito is with us. She's from the Washington Examiner, also a columnist at the New York Post. Evan Osnos writes for The New Yorker. He has reported extensively on North Korea and has a piece out this week on the historical context of the current diplomatic effort. And Seung Kim covers the White House from Capitol Hill for the Washington Post. Welcome to all of you. Evan, you have spent some time in North Korea reporting on what you've seen on the ground. This is diplomacy on steroids, on a fast track. Do you have any sense of what is happening inside North Korea when it comes to their own expectations?
Well, I think that, the big question for all of us is how did we go from talking about nuclear war a few months ago to sitting at the negotiating table today? And the answer is that actually, beneath the pyrotechnics, there has been this big dynamic going on, which is that North Korea has been trying, not only over the last several months, but over the last few years, to try to figure out a way how to engage the outside world. They're sort of trying to do what China did in the late 1970s. And we have to, they don't want to be compared to China. But remember, China was a communist country, it still is, that said we have to open up economic control, maintain political control. And part of sitting down with Donald Trump is to say, how do we hold on to our dictatorship in Pyongyang while also beginning to engage the outside world economically?
Little by little, without threatening their control, I think is key there. Seung, when you look at these talks, you heard Senator Markey on this program just say a few moments ago, he doesn't feel like Congress is clued in, being briefed, and that key information is being shared. Are you hearing similar gripes?
I think the way that the diplomacy is being engaged is kind of leaving almost everybody in the dark right now. But I think what's going to be critical to see in the summit and in subsequent meetings going on to see whether if the president does submit something to Congress for approval. And as we've talked about before, that was a major concern from Republicans during the Obama administration that he didn't get official congressional sign-off for the Iran deal. So I think it'd be interesting to see. Senators have said that the administration has already made those commitments to submit any sort of agreement to Capitol Hill, but obviously that would only begin a massive fight in Congress over whether to approve that nuclear deal.
It was interesting to hear that Senator Lindsey Graham has an authorization to use military force ready to go, suggesting he thinks the president would have to ask permission, essentially, before taking military strikes.
And it was also interesting with Senator Markey just earlier, refusing to even entertain the prospect of an AUMF because he says there's no military option on the Korean Peninsula. A lot of members of Congress feel that way as well. And that's why both Democrats and Republicans, have been so eager to see these diplomatic efforts succeed.
Salena, you have your ear often to the ground when it comes to how the Trump supporters and Trump base receive some of this information. This is a high-risk gamble for the president. What is the perception here? Does he walk away with a win just by walking into that room with Kim Jong-un?
Pretty much. That's what he does best, is high-risk gambles, and he does things that are a little bit unorthodox and not as traditional as you would see other presidents. I have found, not just with people that supported Trump, but people that either stayed at home or supported Clinton, have been able to step back on this issue and understand that we're in the middle of something very historic. It's sort of, if you're older, it's sort of like Nixon in China. Or if you're a little less older, it's sort of like Reagan in Geneva with Gorbachev. So I think people understand there's a moment here that we might all be able to benefit from. And so I think they're enjoying, or they're at least sitting back and watching this with maybe hope and skepticism.
Molly, you, on a different topic, have a cover story in Time. You write about the Mueller investigation, something that the president doesn't really want as much press about, but is certainly angered by and tweeting about himself. This is a major diversion from that, of course, right now. But you did see a development in the case with more indictments against the former Trump campaign chair, Paul Manafort, this week. How significant?
Well, Mueller is playing hardball, as he sort of has been all along. But there has been a notion that he is ratcheting up the pressure on Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, who was out on bail pending a trial, who has, unlike several former Trump associates who have pleaded guilty so far, Manafort has continued to fight the charges very hard, and he's now accused of tampering with potential witnesses. And Mueller is seeking to throw him in jail pending his trial, and also bringing charges based on that alleged witness tampering. So we see, increasing pressure on Manafort, potentially trying to get Manafort to cooperate, to turn on President Trump and offer evidence having to do with the substance of the investigation. Remember, the charges against Manafort have to do with things that he did long before he ever joined the Trump campaign. It's money laundering and other charges from his career as a lobbyist. So that's not what the Mueller investigation is supposed to be about. His mandate is to investigate Russian meddling, and this is one of the criticisms from the president and other critics of the investigation, is he has wandered quite far afield of that supposed mandate. So the idea is that Mueller may be putting pressure on Manafort and others in order to try to get at the potential collusion that he is investigating in 2016.
Salena, while this may be far afield of the mandate, these are significant, and this is actual legal momentum here.
Right.
These are individuals being charged, companies being charged as well here. So can the president still get away with calling it a witch hunt?
He probably will, whether it's true or not. That's the mantra that he has adopted, and I don't think he's going to stray from it. And to Molly's point, the president is unhappy with how far out this scope has come. And he believes that to him, this is proof that this is not about him, and that the charges against him are unfair, and this is proof in the pudding, and I think that's where the president's head is right now on this issue.
Seung, are we going to see anything from Congress on the immigration front before these congressional races in November, or is this just an internal fight with no progress?
Count me as a skeptic of any sort of immigration action on Capitol Hill. I think the big day to watch is Tuesday, because that's been kind of the imposed deadline for this discharge petition, which is a complicated procedural maneuver to trigger these immigration votes in the House. Tuesday is a tentative deadline that these House moderates have set on whether these quiet negotiations with conservatives would actually succeed, or if they're just going to go ahead and force votes over the desires of their leadership. But Republicans have constantly struggled on immigration issues for years and years, and there is a reason why when immigration legislation that involves any sort of pathway for citizenship, whether it's for Dreamers or for a broader population, it's passed under Democratic control. It was a Democratic-led Senate in 2013 and a lame duck Democratic House in 2010 that passed the DREAM Act. So if there is a way to coalesce both the moderates who want these legal solution for the Dreamers and the conservatives who do also want a legal solution as well, but they've talked about the need for more security measures. If there's a way to coalesce 218 Republican votes on that, we'll see by Tuesday. But again, count me as a skeptic.
Evan, you heard Larry Kudlow on this program, the economic advisor to the president, saying that the blow up with the Canadian prime minister really had more to do with the North Korean leader and making him look weak, making the president look weak ahead of those talks.
Yeah.
You don't normally hear those two countries in the same sentence, but is there something to what the White House is arguing here, that so much of the U.S. weight has to do with perception?
Well, look, the president decided that this was a grave insult that he couldn't abide from Canada. The reality is our allies and our adversaries, things are being thrown upside down right now. The president walked into what should have been the friendliest club he will ever be in, and he managed to leave that in tatters. And that is a problem that doesn't just pose a challenge for the president tomorrow. This is a long-range issue that he has to confront. How do we keep Americans safe over the long term? The way you do that traditionally is by keeping your allies close and working through problems in ways that make sense. This is not how we've done it in the past, and I don't think it puts us in a particularly strong moment as we go into Singapore.
Seung, do you think that, it's been interesting to see some Republicans speak out on the trade front with this dispute at the G7, but they're sort of few and far between. there hasn't been outcry.
And I think we saw a moment earlier this week when we did see Republicans starting to coalesce around legislation that would limit the president's power on tariffs. We have that legislation from Senator Bob Corker, who isn't always a Trump ally, but you do have senators such as Pat Toomey, Mike Lee, Jeff Flake behind that legislation as well, with a bunch of Democrats. But the president gathered about a dozen Senate Republicans at the White House on Wednesday, mostly friendly Senate Republicans, and he made the message clear that I don't like this bill. I think it infringes on my power to negotiate on trade issues. And Republican leadership tell us that this bill, you can get a vote if you want, but if it doesn't have a presidential signature, it's all just kind of an exercise.
Interesting to see how this develops. Thanks to all of you.